Thank you. Thank you so much. First, thank you to ADL for your tremendous leadership on combating anti-Semitism. And a special thanks to Jonathan Greenblatt for the invitation to speak today and for your work with Congress on this critical issue. Never again is now. That is the reason we are all here today, to ensure that these words are actually acted upon. On October 7th, and in the 513 days since, we have seen anti-Semitic atrocities that we never thought would happen in our lifetimes, both at home and abroad. The worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and the open celebration of those heinous acts of terrorism in our streets and on our college campuses. Enough is enough. From capitals to campuses, we have watched too many with the power to act do nothing. But there is hope. In the famous words of Holocaust survivor and Jewish advocate Simon Wiesenthal, who dedicated his life to ensuring the horrors of the Holocaust are never forgotten, he said, "For evil to flourish, it only requires good men to do nothing." Under President Trump, America refuses to do nothing. I, as a leader in the United States Congress and the next U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, refuse to do nothing. You see, for me, Israel and the Jewish people hold a very special place in my heart, which has fueled my deep dedication and my deep-held commitment to ensuring the evils of anti-Semitism are extinguished. As a young girl from upstate New York, I grew up with many Jewish friends. I attended many bar and bat mitzvahs. I've joined many families over the years for Shabbat dinners. As a Harvard student, I went with college friends to events at Harvard Hillel and have celebrated Britot for friends' sons and signed the ketubah at a friend's wedding. Throughout my life, the importance of the State of Israel was clear. A shining beacon of freedom and civilization in the Middle East, and intrinsically entwined with the success of America. And I've had the privilege to visit Israel many times throughout my life, both before and during my time in Congress. And each and every time, I have been truly moved by Israel and her spirit. And today, it is more important than ever that the United States of America shows moral leadership and stands with Israel and the Jewish people. Under President Trump, there will be no daylight when it comes to the United States' support for Israel. There is a reason that Prime Minister Netanyahu calls him, quote, the best friend that Israel has ever had. We know here today the horrors of October 7th changed everything. It made crystal clear that this fight is not just Israel's fight alone, but the West's fight, a fight against the evil of Hamas, a war between good and evil, civilization and barbarity. We will not and must not rest until every single hostage is returned home and Hamas terrorists are eradicated from the face of the earth. And we must remind ourselves what happened in our own country after this horrific day. In the aftermath of the bloodiest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust and the days since, we saw our, quote, most elite universities utterly fail their Jewish students. The world saw, in what is now the most viewed congressional testimony in history, with over 1 billion views, we saw the moral rot of America's higher education. And I want to take you directly into that committee room. After seeing the skyrocketing rise in anti-Semitism, including at my own college alma mater, I encouraged the Education and Workforce Committee Chairwoman, Virginia Fox, that we needed to hold a hearing with university presidents of MIT, Penn, and Harvard to hold them accountable. As the first member of my immediate family to have the opportunity to graduate from college, it was a real privilege for me to have the opportunity to attend Harvard. And it has never been perfect, but when I attended, I could have never imagined what the campus would turn into or tolerate nearly 20 years later. So we held the hearing with the university presidents to demand answers and accountability. But instead, we were met with weak and morally bankrupt university leaders who evaded our questions and refused to answer direct questions with direct answers. And that question, it was only in the final moments that the clip that went viral happened. The media and the majority of the attendees had largely left the hearing when I decided to ask an incredibly simple question. And it was not a political question. It was a moral one. And it was actually not one of my prepared questions, but one that I had written down in pencil probably 5 minutes before because I thought it would force them to answer correctly. And that simple moral question was this: does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct? And one after the other said, quote, "It depends on the context." And the world heard. At the time, I had no idea the earthquake that questioning would set off in American higher education. It was truly the question and horrific answer heard around the world. And the reality is that everyday Americans, like my wonderful constituents, they know without hesitation that the answer to that question is an easy one. It is yes, and it certainly does not depend on the context. In a matter of weeks and months and additional hearings, university presidents from Harvard, Penn, Columbia, and more were forced to resign, 5 down and so many to go. And now here we are today. Just look at the actions of Barnard College's so-called leadership last week. On the same day that the world was mourning the murders of the Bebas babies by Hamas terrorists, pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizers took over Barnard College campus building, spewing anti-Semitic and anti-Israel hate, assaulting a staff member, and sending him to the hospital. Meanwhile, Barnard's so-called leadership held off on calling in the law enforcement stationed outside, instead offering up a meeting with the college president to negotiate. This is not leadership. As Jewish students at Barnard and colleges and universities around the nation fear for their lives and safety, college leaders continue to pander to the pro-Hamas demands. To the Jewish students listening and here today, do not relent or give in. America and the force of the Trump administration are behind you, and we will not stop fighting. President Trump has made clear the importance of this issue. In his first month in office, he signed a historic executive order to combat anti-Semitism on our campuses and streets using every tool the government has. Any foreign student participating in these anti-Semitic acts must be stripped of their visas and immediately deported. President Trump's administration has also already initiated civil rights investigations of these hotbeds of campus anti-Semitism, including at Columbia and Northwestern. And I know The incoming Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, Attorney General Pam Bondi, and their teams, including Leo Terrell, will hold these universities accountable for their failures. And the ADL's work helping expose the rot on higher ed campuses has been invaluable to these efforts. And I am honored to join President Trump in this fight, earning his nomination to serve in his cabinet as the next U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. We know the United Nations is indeed a deep den of anti-Semitism, infected with the same rampant anti-Israel and anti-American hate and moral rot that has polluted America's higher education system. Especially since the barbaric Hamas attacks of October 7th, the UN has continuously betrayed Israel, betraying America in the process, acting instead as an apologist for Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies. Under President Trump, as United States Ambassador to the United Nations, the days of propping up organizations that run counter to our interest are long gone. We will no longer fund terrorism, anti-Semitism, and anti-Israel hate. That stops immediately. And I am so proud that President Trump has the strongest record of any American president when it comes to standing with Israel. From moving the U.S. Embassy to its rightful place, Israel's eternal capital of Jerusalem, to negotiating the historic Abraham Accords, the greatest stride towards peace normalization in more than a quarter century, to aligning U.S. Central Command with Israel, a change that fostered daily communications with the IDF, joint exercises, and crucial coordination with British and Arab partners that helped defend against the unprecedented Iranian attacks against Israel last year. And I believe it's quite obvious to the world that if President Trump had remained in office, October 7th would never have happened. He has brought his pro-Israel policies to the White House, and in just a month, the world has watched as President Trump reasserts America First, peace through strength foreign policy. Only 12 hours after his re-election, Hamas terrorists called for an immediate end to the war, a direct result of President Trump's restoration of American strength to the world stage. Innocent hostages taken by Hamas terrorists have been returned home, as President Trump promised, all hell if they were not brought back. And we will continue to work until every hostage comes back home and is returned home. Importantly, we restored maximum pressure on Iran and imposed sanctions on the illegitimate International Criminal Court, which is targeting Israel with anti-Semitic attacks. And at the United Nations, we took the decisive action to defund UNRWA, the pro-Hamas terrorist front group who committed atrocities on October 7th. And I can promise you this, that as the United States Ambassador to the United Nations, we are not only going to defund UNRWA, we must totally dismantle it. And as we approach the 50th anniversary of Ambassador Moynihan's historic opposition to the United Nations' disgraceful Zionism is Racism resolution, the time has come to bring about needed change. We must redirect the course of history away from the anti-Semitism and the anti-Israel bias that Ambassador Moynihan described as, quote, a great evil that has been loosed upon the world. Let me be clear. Everyday Americans understand the need to support Israel's fight, and that the same pro-Hamas terrorist sympathizers who chant death to Israel also chant death to America. These terrorists want to topple Israel, topple the U.S., and we must never yield. Never again is right now. Under President Trump, America will always stand up for the Jewish people, both at home and abroad. Israel has our unequivocal support, and we will not rest until every single hostage is brought home and the Hamas terrorists are eradicated. And together, we must remind the world about the moral imperative of standing with the Jewish people, Israel, and together we will combat the evils of anti-Semitism. We will win this fight for the Jewish people. We will win this fight to save America and stand up for our moral values. We will win this fight for our most precious ally, Israel, and we must win this fight for all of Western civilization and humanity. And my message for Turtle Bay is this: hear me clearly, right here and now. The anti-Semites at the United Nations better buckle up, because I'm coming. The university presidents were just a warm-up, and believe me, anyone who knows me knows that I'm just getting started. God bless you. Thank you so much to the ADL. God bless Israel, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.